Today I'm going to be sharing my complete, honest, and unsponsored review of the classic Vego metal raised garden beds. After 3 years, you're probably wondering, do they still hold up? Were they worth the investment? And most importantly, would I buy them again? In this review, I will go over the reason that I bought the size that I did, how well they've held up over time, what I loved about the beds, and also what I disliked about the beds. If you are thinking about investing in some of these Vego raised garden beds, stick around and I will tell you everything that you need to know before you make your decision. Before I dive into my 3-year experience with these garden beds and you have no clue what they actually are, let me quickly go over what they are and what they have to offer. So Vego garden beds are metal beds that you can actually customize. They come in different heights, different sizes, configurations, colors, and they have custom add-ons that you can add onto the beds. Let's go into their height options first. They actually have 3 different heights for their metal raised beds. You can do 11 inches, 17 inches, and 32 inches. I went along with the 17 inches, that is their standard height. They also have a few different color options. They have 2 different green colors that you can pick. They have a pearl white, which is the color that I chose to go with, and they have a gray color. And then we can't forget about the add-ons. That's probably one of my most favorite things about these garden beds is their add-ons. Some of the ones that I actually have are their solar lights. They have 2 different lights that you can buy for the bed attachments. Because the beds are metal, the solar light's actually magnetic onto the front of the bed, and I really like the ambient glow that it gives at night. My second favorite is actually their garden toolbox. I have 2 of these and they attach on the outside of the bed, and they really are nice. They're pretty much waterproof, even though they do have holes on the bottom. I have never had a problem with water being in them. I leave them out there in the winter and they have done amazing. And it's just really nice to have your garden tools and your gloves and everything that you really need for a garden already out there, and I'm not running back and forth between the house or the shed, and I could just go over to the box and pull it on out. Now that you have a better idea of what these raised beds are, let's deep dive into how they have held up over the years and my 3-year experience with these garden beds. So I actually own 4 different sizes of these raised beds. I have a 10-in-1, a 9-in-1, a 6-in-1, and the circle size, which I have all in the color pearl white. Each bed comes with different configurations, hence the name 10-in-1. So the 10-in-1, you can configure it into 10 different sizes. The 6-in-1, you can configure it into 6 different sizes. You get the gist. What I get questions about these beds all the time is, do they scratch or do they bulge on the sides? I have never had any of those 2 things. Now, when it comes down to the scratching part, I have seen and heard many reviews where people complain about how easily they scratch. Now, I'm not going to say that they don't scratch, but with the pearl white color, I honestly have never noticed it. And maybe it's because it is a lighter color and I don't have that darker green color or that darker gray color that they offer. Maybe those ones are a little bit more noticeable. The only thing that I noticed with my beds being the pearl white is they look a little more dirtier than they did the day I put them in. But that is to be expected with them being out in the elements and all the dirt and the water and the rain, when I cut grass, stuff like that. But that's not something that deters me when I'm picking these beds and the color. As far as the bulging, I do not have any bulging at all within my beds. I have actually used the hugelkultur method where I put logs and cardboard and leaf matter in the bottom, and then you top it off with soil. So I have all kinds of things inside my garden bed, and they still look the same as they did 3 years ago. And I add dirt about every single year, and they're a thin metal material, but at the same time, it's definitely durable enough in the way that they connect. They also have these little metal rods in the center that kind of pull it together when you do the bigger, longer configurations. So I really think that they are constructed really well. They held up really well, especially for 3 years. I really have no complaints on that part of the garden bed. Next we'll talk about is the heat retention. People will ask all the time, or I see on different websites or website forums or videos, people say, oh, these beds have to get hot. They have to fry your plants. They're not good for them. Don't buy metal raised beds. Now, as far as Vego raised beds go, there is no problem in my growing zone. I live in Southwest Ohio, zone 6B, and I've never had a problem with them overheating my plants. If anything, my plants have thrived in these beds. They do have a USDA approved paint on the outside, and I do think that helps with the heat reflection. Now, honestly, yes, the dirt is going to be warmer in my raised garden bed than it is in the ground, but if anything, I think that has made my plants thrive versus hurting them in any way. And then obviously some of the other pros to the beds was the add-ons, which I already touched on. Now that I've talked about all my pros, let's talk about the cons. So these are all the things that you should consider when buying these beds. Now, the biggest downside to any raised garden bed, whether it is the Vego metal raised beds or a DIY raised bed that you built out of wood, is the cost of filling it with soil, which you will want to keep in mind when you are choosing the height of your bed. For example, Vego has a soil calculator on their website. So you can go to the size of the bed, the configuration of the bed, and click soil calculator, and it will show you what they estimate to be how much it'll cost and how many bags it'll take to fill your raised bed. Now, let's say you have the 10-in-1 at 17 inches high and you're doing the 4x8 configuration. Now, to fill it entirely with soil from their calculations, it would cost you around $900 of just straight soil to fill this bed, and that is absolutely absurd. That is a really high number just for the 10-in-1 at 17 inches in a 4x8 configuration. Now, if you want to do a different method, which they also have on their calculator, is the hugelkultur I cannot say that word. It is the hugelkultur method. So this is where you take leaf matter, cardboard, logs, which I have done, and you put that at the bottom of your bed, and then you put soil on top of it. So their calculation is, if you did it this way, and all that stuff is free, and you take about 15 bags of dirt and put it on top, it's saying it's going to cost you around $250 for that 4x8 configuration. Now, I'm not sure where they're getting their prices from on the soil, because that really can change on a billion different factors: where you live, what soil you're buying, how big the bags are. But what I suggest is, if it is available to you and you are able to get it, go to your local nursery and either have them bring you a dumpster load, or if you have a truck or some kind of way to go and pick that dirt up, do that, because it is much cheaper. In the town that I live in and what I have available to me, I can go to our local nursery and it's $60 per tractor load and $36 for each tractor load after. Where I go, the scoop is about 2/3 a yard per scoop, and I think that's roughly about 18 cubic feet. So yeah, it does take a couple of scoops to fill up this one bed, but it is actually a much cheaper, especially if you do it the hugelkultur way. Now, I know that wasn't exactly a diss on Vego beds. That could be any raised garden bed, and that's something you have to keep in mind. But just keep in mind when you're choosing the height, if you're going to go with a metal raised bed, is maybe go with the 11-inch or maybe go with the 17-inch like I did. If you go with that 32-inch, yeah, you won't have to be bending down as much, but that is a lot of dirt. I did not even do the calculation on their website for the 32-inch, but I can just imagine that that price is outrageous. But my next con, I guess you can call it, my things that you need to consider when buying a metal raised bed, is that they don't have a ledge to sit on. So when I find out that I am in the garden, I prefer to like sit down on the edge of my garden edge so I can like actually do what I'm doing. But since these beds don't have an edge or a flat surface to sit on, I'm always squatting down and it hurts my knees, and that's just a personal thing for me. But I would prefer to do a ledge on the edge so I can sit on it. So the end question is, would I recommend these beds? And 100% is yes, I would recommend them. If you are not a DIY person or someone who is capable or have the resources where you can go out and buy the wood and DIY yourself your own raised bed, then I say 100% go for it. Go on Amazon, order that Vego raised garden bed, get it shipped to your house, put it together. All you need is a drill, and then put it out in your garden. The fact that these beds are technically modular, I say that in quotations because it's not necessarily something I would love to do, but it would be much of a hassle to move them around, but it's definitely doable and a lot easier than if you were going to have wooden raised beds versus the metal raised beds, which I am actually going to be doing this spring. When springtime comes, I'm actually going to be moving a couple of my Vego beds around to accompany my garden for much bigger beds. Since I live in a subdivision on a half an acre with limited space because I do have some of a slope to my yard, I'm just looking to maximize my growing space. Every year I am adding on to my garden, I'm changing things up, and this year I'm really thinking about moving some of my Vego beds and coming in with a ground contact pressure treated lumber, and I'm going to be building my own raised garden beds out of wood. Now, some people have some concerns when people mention pressure treated wood and raised garden beds, but if you want a different video on that, I think I have some really good points that can prove to you that they are perfectly fine and not harmful in any way. I went and I grabbed my paper, but I wanted to compare what it would cost to build a raised bed versus buying a Vego bed like I already have. We'll just go with the 10-in-1, 17 inches, 4x8 configurations. That's the last bed that I bought last year for my garden from Vego. Now, I'm gonna be building practically the same thing, but I'm going to be adding a wood ledge on the edge of this bed. And I have everything written down. I did the math already. So by comparison, if I build a 4x8 wooden raised bed with 1x6 lumber, just the wood with, I'm going to be using these concrete corners. So the wood and the concrete quarters, I think it comes out to be about $130. That is 17 inches tall, 4x8 configuration, which is comparable to the 10-in-1, 17 inches tall. And if you're adding the little wooden ledge around it, I think the total thing came down to, it says about $160 is what it's going to cost me to build a bed that's almost pretty much the exact same size, maybe a little bit bigger, and I can customize it to what I want. Now, I know a wooden raised bed is probably not going to last as long as my metal raised beds, but that's something I'm willing to trade off because I really don't think that they're going to just fall apart in 1 or 2 years. My parents actually built this exact bed last year, and it is what persuaded me to think about going the wood route. His looks so good, and we're here in Ohio, zone 6B. It has snowed a lot this year, and that bed has not warped. It has not messed up anyway. It looks perfectly fine, and that's really what I want in our garden. So I'm going to do that so I can maximize the space that we already have and just keep my metal raised beds, but kind of move them around a little bit. If you guys want to know more about my garden plans, I can do a video on that. I actually have, you probably saw in some of the B-roll that I've included in here, that I have county line troughed beds. They're not actually beds, but I turned them into beds. I got those from Tractor Supply my very first year in gardening, and then my neighbor actually gave me one. They've been great, but like I said, they kind of eliminate the amount of space that I have to grow, and I will be completely taking those out of our gardening area, and we might repurpose them somewhere else, but they will just not be in my overall main garden section. And that's what I plan on doing, is really replacing those beds with the wooden beds and then kind of moving some of my Vego beds around to configure it a little bit better so I can squeeze some more beds in. If you're looking for something long lasting, low maintenance, and easy to install, go with the metal raised bed if you have the space for it. If you are more of a DIY person, want to save a little bit more money but more a little hands-on, then go with a DIY raised bed. I'm for both of them. I don't see a problem in either of them at all, and I am really happy with my Vego raised beds, and maybe one day down the line I will buy some more. If you have any questions about Vego raised beds that I did not answer, then please leave them down in the comments. I will answer them as best as I can, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!